Thank you everyone for attending today's Lunch and Learn on Paperwork Optimization. My name is Sean Nolan and I am the Customer Education Specialist here at Genie Solutions. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we stand. For me in Brisbane, this is the Turrbal and the Yagara peoples. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. What is paperwork optimization? Genie is a very powerful program with many features that are designed to save you time. If we can save you a few minutes every time you do a particular task, that is a few minutes you gain to do something else. Today's presentation is around paperwork and features that are built into Genie that are designed to reduce the amount of time spent on letters, procedures, and filling out forms. Today's presentation is going to be very different to previous webinars. We are going to be very hands-on with today's presentation in using Genie, as there is a lot to show. This presentation will be recorded and emailed to you tomorrow, so you can also refer back to it. We will start with creating merged letter templates, where I will also show you how to use fields and expressions. We will move on to referral reply letter templates to other practitioners. I will show you how to save time when creating procedure records, how to create quote templates for different scenarios. The last topic will be how to reduce the number of times you are handwriting on a paper-based form using our custom forms module. The last few minutes will be our live question and answer segment, where we will answer as many questions as we can. There is a Q&A box in the Zoom window, so I encourage you to type any questions you have during the presentation into this box. I will be joined by Alexi, the National Training Manager, and Trillian, the Genie Business Development Manager for the session. If we do miss your question, we will be sending out a survey link in a few days' time, and we encourage you to also ask your question there. As mentioned before, a large part of today's presentation is hands-on. So next, I'm going to open Genie and show you Genie. In Genie, there are two different types of letter templates. Most of you on the call will be aware of the two, but I'm just going to point out the difference between the two again. You have the red feather, which is designed for letters to other practitioners. You also have the gold pages, which are letters that are designed to go to patients and non-practitioner entries. We're going to be starting by talking about the gold page letters or our merged letters. So if I've got my patient selected, I'm going to click my gold pages icon. And first thing I'm going to do is create a brand new template. So to do this, I click the merged letter button that's on the right-hand side. This gives us a blank canvas so we can begin building our template. Now, the first type of template I'm going to be building is a medical certificate. So first thing I'm going to do is double click in the header area, and that gives me a section where I can put in a letterhead. Now you can create a letterhead from scratch if you need to, or if you have your practice preferences or your user preferences set up with the letterhead already, you can bring in a letterhead from there. For today's demonstration, I'm going to be bringing in a letterhead from my picture library. So I'm going to point out this picture from library over here. I already have a letterhead loaded in this window, so I'm going to go OK. This window comes up, and this is just asking how do you want to format the letterhead and what should it do when it is put on your page. The top option is perfectly OK for the purpose of a letterhead, but that means keep the picture in the same spot no matter what happens with your text. Sorry, apologies. That means that the picture will follow the page as you go down. This other option means static. It remains in the page as it is. I'm going to keep it just as this top option for today's presentation. And that puts in my letterhead. I can click and drag, and that adjusts the size of my letterhead. I'm going to start now by building my medical certificate. So first thing I'm going to do is center my text. I'm going to change my font size, and I'm going to type in the words medical certificate. Press enter twice and left align and reduce my font size again. I'm going to introduce you to fields and expressions next. So I'm going to point out that there's this expressions list, and these are useful things that you can bring into your letter template when you're building your letter template, or maybe when you're using the template to print out for the patient or send to a practitioner. In this expressions list, there's a very useful today's date option towards the bottom. What this one does is it will always bring in the date of the letter. So today being 20th of April, it'll put in 20th of April whenever I use this template. Tomorrow, it will say the 21st of April. So I'm going to choose this fourth option, and I choose OK. It's going to reduce my font size again. Press Enter a few times. Next, I'm going to be typing the words to whom it may concern. I type the letters re or who it is regarding. Now, at this point, I want to be bringing in the patient's name. So at this point in time, I'm going to move away from this expressions list, and I'm going to be moving over to this fields tab over here. So fields let you bring in a specific bit of information. So in this case, I want to bring in information from the patient's demographic window, which is what we call patient. I click the triangle next to patient, and I find first name in this list. I double click, and because I had Fiona Rogers selected in the appointment diary, that's why Fiona's name is coming up. Of course, when you change it to a different patient's name will come. I will show you that later in the presentation. I find surname in the list, and I double click. I type in DOB, and in this case, I want to bring in the patient's date of birth. So I double click DOB in this list. Press Enter a few times, and I'm going to type in the following. This is to certify that, bring in the patient's first name again, is suffering from a medical condition. Stop. I want to bring in the patient's first name again, so I double click on first name again. Will not be fit for normal duties. Between, and Genie can't tell you when the patient can and can't have off, so I'm just going to leave a blank space. I'm going to type in and, blank space, full stop. Kind regards. And this is where I'm going to be bringing in the doctor's name, which is Dr. A. Demo. You might, of course, want to bring in more information into your medical certificate, more fields and expressions. I will show you in a bit some of the other things we can bring into these templates. But for the purpose of medical certificate, I'm going to say that this is sufficient. And I'm going to show you the options at the top. First, I'm going to give this a title. This is called a medical certificate. Next, I'm going to tick the Save Copy and Clinical Record box. Why that is important is that every time I print out this template, I want a copy saved in Genie's clinical file, so that if you ever need to refer to it or reprint it, then you've got that accurate copy there. Last thing I'm going to be doing is I click on this big Save button at the top over here. The only reason I click on this button is I want to make a permanent change to the template, which I am doing in this instance. I'm just going to choose Save here. This is different to the printer button over here. Now, because I've got Save Copy and Clinical Record ticked over here, what that means is whenever it is printed, a copy will also be saved in the clinical file. So remember, you only use the Save button when you're making a permanent change to the template. Otherwise, if you just want to save it to the patient's clinical file, you click this Print button here because that box is ticked. If I go Close, you can see I've now got on my list medical certificate. If I close out of here and I choose a different patient, and I go to the gold pages icon and double click on medical certificate, you will see now Christopher Green's name comes up along with Christopher Green's date of birth. A function you've got built into Genie, if you're not sure if it's something that you've typed in or if it is a field reference that you're looking at, is this View References button. You'll see what I've typed in remains, but anything that Genie was using as a field reference has suddenly changed to grayed out writing. So really useful button if you ever need to work with a template and you're not sure what information it is that Genie's bringing in. So we've created a medical certificate and we've done some good work here. What if we want to make an identical copy of this template and maybe just change a word or two? We don't have to recreate the whole thing from scratch, including the letterhead, changing font sizes, and bring in the same field references again. We can duplicate this, which makes an identical copy. To do a duplication, I click on Medical Certificate and I click on Duplicate. In this instance, I'm going to be making an attendance certificate. I click OK, and I now have attendance certificate in this list. I can double click on this attendance certificate, and it's an identical replica to the template that I've just created. So it saves you a lot of hard work. Instead of a medical certificate, I'm going to call this one an attendance certificate. From here, I'm going to only change a few things. So I'm happy with always bringing in the current date, to whom it may concern, patient name, date of birth. But I'm going to be removing this section over here. I'm going to be instead typing in attended my practice on, and now I want to bring in information about the appointment. So what happens is I'm going to be moving away from this expressions list, and I go to fields. In fields, there's a little arrow next to the word appointment. So this looks at the appointments. From here, I'm going to be double clicking on start date. That's what Genie uses to say what date is the appointment. It's called a start date. So because the appointment is on the 20th of April, that's why 20th of April is coming up. If the appointment was on the 19th of April, it would say 19th of April. Now, I also wanted to say what time the patient attended the appointment. So I'm going to be typing in on, and I double click on start time. So the patient was booked in at 9:15. That's why 9:15 comes up. Full stop, add a little bit of a space. And one extra thing you can do over here, maybe you want to use this attendance certificate or medical certificate and you've got multiple doctors in your practice. Instead of just typing in the doctor's name, I'm going to point out in the appointment section, you can use name over here, which brings in, sorry, apologies, it wasn't name, it was provider name. And that brings in the name of the doctor who the patient had the appointment. From here, I've made a permanent change to the template. So I'm going to click that Save Changes to Template button over here and save. So right there, you can see that we've got two templates that have been set up, an attendance certificate and a medical certificate. And using fields and expressions like I have, hopefully saves you the need to change the date, change the time, change a wording or two when using the same template over and over again. Next, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you how to create an operation record. So I want to point out that I've got a patient over here at 1 o'clock, Farah Khan. If I go to the procedure record, I'm going to point out that there's quite a few things here in this procedure window. I'm going to point out that there's a quotes tab. I'm going to point out that there's some operation notes. What if you wanted to create a letter template that was an operation record? From here, I'm going to go to the goal pages, and I've already set up part of the baseline. It's called operation report, but of course you may need to duplicate or click merge letter to create a new one. So if I open up this operation report that I've already made, there's quite a few fields here that I want to bring in about the procedure itself. So I'm going to fill this out. First, for patient, I'm going to click fields at the top because I want to bring in specifics about the patient. Arrow next to patient, and again, I find first name and double click, and I find surname and I double click. Date of birth, I'm going to find date of birth over here and double click. Which surgeon was this booked in with? From here, I'm going to point out that to bring in information from the procedure record, we click on procedures over here. And in here, I have an option for provider. Who the anaesthetist is, I find anaesthetist. Who the assistant is, I double click on assistant. Which hospital this was performed at? I double click on hospital. What the name of the procedure is? It is called procedure name. What the date of the procedure is? This one is called procedure date. I want to bring in the doctor's procedure notes next about what was actually done in theatre. So to do this, I have findings. There's a findings box in the procedure record, so I double click on finding. There was a technique box, so I double click on technique. And there's post-op. I double click on post-op. Kind regards. We want to bring in the surgeon's name again, so we find provider. From here, I've made a permanent change to this template, so I click my Save Changes to Template button. Are you sure you want to make changes? We always click Save if we're making a permanent change. Close out of here, and I have a new operation report. So if I've got a different patient, and I double click on Operation Report, you can see information from this patient's operation has just been brought in as well. So that is the basics in terms of merge letters. These are letters to patients and not to a specific doctor. The next type of template I'm going to be talking about are referral reply letters. Now, these are letters that are done to other practitioners. So for this example, again, I'm going to choose Fiona Rogers, and this time I'm going to click on the red feather icon. You can see that there is some information about the patient being brought in and some field references, but we're missing quite a bit of information. For instance, who is this letter addressed to? So I'm going to point out that when you open up a template, it always opens up with what we call the default letter. I'm going to make a change to this default letter first by clicking on Edit Template at the top right. From here, I can build my template. So where I've got my cursor over here, I'm going to go to Fields again. And I want to look at the address book of Genie, because this is where it will say, who is this letter being sent to? And bring in information from that doctor. From here, I have a full name option. And I have a full address option as well. Now, most of the time when I'm doing a letter, you might have a blank canvas, and in which case what we've got is perfectly fine. So your doctor can start typing with whatever is required, or maybe you've got an external typist who does the typing for you. In this particular scenario, I'm going to be typing in the words, thank you for your referral of, and I want to bring in information about patient again. So I find the patient section, and I double click on first name. I put in a full stop. So I've got thank you for your referral of Fiona, and that gives you a nice starting point and to begin your templates. From here, next thing I want to do, I want to bring in an electronic signature. So maybe your doctor signs your referrals by hand, but if you want to bring in an electronic signature, the first thing that you need to do is get your doctor to make a digital copy. Now, sometimes you can open up a paint program on your computer and manually make it that way. Maybe your doctor can handwrite it on a blank piece of paper. You scan it and you crop that just to have the signature in view. What I'm going to be doing is going to the Expressions tab over here, and I'm going to show you how we bring in an external picture. Click where I want the external picture to go, and I double click on the picture from Library option here. From here, I want to add a new item to my picture library to be used on future letters. So I click Add. It's asking me to locate the picture, so I click on Browse. And here is my signature that I've already got saved on my computer, and I choose Open. I'm going to just keep this as the default options for now, but you can make changes to the size if you wanted to here. I've now got the signature permanently saved in my Genie picture library, meaning I can bring it into any future template I want. If I go OK, Now, I talked about this before. I'm just going to touch on it again. Remember, insert picture and page is a static option. So you choose that if you want the picture to remain in the same spot, no matter what happens with the text. But a signature, we like to follow the page down. So if the signature is always at the bottom just before the sign-off. If it's a one-page document, you want it at the bottom of page 1. If it's a two-page document, you want it at the bottom of page 2. So insert picture and text flow is great for your signatures. I choose OK. And that brings in the signature. I can click on the signature and reduce the reduce the picture size as I need. From here, I'm happy with how our template looks. So I'm going to click Save at the top right. Genie's asking, well, you made a change to this template. The template or the letter that I've got on the screen now, do I also want to update the letter that I've got currently on the screen with the changes? Normally, I say update now when this comes. And you can see we now have this template set up, ready for your doctor to use. I'm going to next show you how we can make another template to another doctor. So for some of you on this call, you might be using one template, and that's perfectly fine. But sometimes you might be finding that, hey, I'm doing the same template, or I'm making the same change 50 times a week to letters going out to other doctors. Maybe that's a good situation where you might want to be bringing in another template to be used. So I'm going to point out, if I click this template drop-down menu over here, I can make a brand new template to be used. I'm going to choose New Template. And this gives me a new template. Now, what I'm going to be saying is this is a outgoing specialist letter. Possibly you're a specialist on this call and you wish to send an onward referral to another specialist. That's the scenario I'm going to be working with today. There's that duplicate menu, the same as we had in our merged letters. So if you wish to make an identical copy to an existing template you have set up, you can quite safely duplicate that existing copy and make your changes. So in this particular instance, I'm going to be changing this. Instead of thank you for your referral, I'm going to say thank you for seeing Fiona. Next, what I want to do is bring in some extra information that might be of use for this specialist that might be seeing this patient. So I'm going to press Enter a couple of times, and I'm going to be bringing in some information from my expressions list. So possibly your doctor uses the allergies in the clinical file. I double-click on allergies in this expressions list. We have some formatting options. Just for today's demonstration, I'm going to keep these as they are, but you can play around with those if you need to. I want to be bringing in the current problems list, so I double-click on current problems. Click on OK. And I want to be bringing in the medications list, which is called current medications. So it's because I've got Fiona Rogers selected, it's bringing in Fiona's allergies, current problems, and medications. If you had a different patient selected, of course, it'll be bringing in that patient's allergies, current problems, and medications when you use this template. Just some other items you've got in this window in the expressions list that might be of use. Procedure items, if you're doing a procedure, what items you wish to bring in. And your letterhead, which I mentioned before, brings in your letterhead from your practice or user preferences. But you also have other tables in fields that you can bring in. So for instance, you can bring in anything from your user preferences, for instance, the doctor's name, from your practice preferences list, should you need to for any reason. And from here, I finished setting up my template, so I'm going to click on Save. So what this means is when you got a new referral reply letter that you're sending out, you can safely click on Default Letter, choose your new template, and there it already is set up with some of the hard work for you, and you can dictate your text next. So that covers is the detail that we're going to go through as part of our outgoing letters to other doctors section. In other words, our referral reply letters. I'm going to be next showing you how you can set up procedure templates. Now, these aren't a letter template, but this is something designed in Genie that can save you a significant amount of time when you're making procedure records for patients. So what I mean by that, if I've got Farah Khan here at 1 o'clock, and I click on the green person icon. Sometimes I find practices might be typing in the procedure name, choosing the pre-op diagnosis, post-op diagnosis, indication, pre-op notes, typing in the same item number every single time, typing in the same op notes every single time. What we can do is, if you do a procedure and you've got some things that are identical each time you do this procedure, I'm going to point out there's the Save Template button over here. What is the name of this template that I wish to save for future reference? Knee replacement. If I choose OK, and I'll make a brand new procedure for a patient. So for instance, I'm going to make a procedure for a patient called Mark Henry. I click on the green person on the left, and instead of typing knee replacement, putting in the same pre-op notes, item numbers, and maybe operation notes, I click on Load Template this time. Here's my knee replacement. If I choose Open, the same information being these items here, the same item number for your quote, and the same operation notes come up. So procedure templates are a fantastic way you can save time. Next, I'm going to be showing you quote templates and how quote templates work in Genie. So if I've got Farah Khan over here, I'm going to go to procedure screen. I'm going to show you in the quotes tab that some of you will be familiar. You can click on this drop down, choose print quote, and choose quote. You'll be familiar that there are some things that are automatically coming up. I want to point out that there's a table here with item numbers, fees, rebates, out-of-pocket costs. What drives that in Genie? All your quote templates are here on the left-hand side. If I double-click on quote, I want to point out XXX. That's where Genie brings in the quote information, those item numbers, fees, and rebates. What if you want to make additional quote templates? How does that work? So from the screen, I already had one with XXX being this quote. I'm going to use that duplicate function. Same one I was talking about before. I'm going to call this one a known gap quote. I double-click on known gap quote. It's an identical copy. XXX appears here. And I want to point out use for quotes. That's what makes it appear in the quotation window, allowing you to print it. So for a known gap quote, we might want to have the words, the out-of-pocket cost is payable 7 days before the procedure. Again, I'm making a permanent change to my template, so I click the Save Changes to Template button. Save. If I close out of here, I now have known gap quote. And I'm going to create one more quotation. It's going to be a private quotation. There's a really nice function Genie has when we do this. So I'm just going to duplicate my known gap quote, call this one a private quote. If I double-click on private quote, I'm going to change some words. The full cost is payable 7 days before the procedure, but instead of XXX, which is where the item numbers, fees, rebates come in, I'm going to put in ZZZ in capital letters. I'm going to save my changes to my template and save. If I now show you the quotation window for this patient, if I go to my quotes tab, I want to point out now in quote actions, when I go to print my quote, all those templates that I had set up that have use for quotes ticked at the top come up. So if I choose my known gap quote, you'll see that there's my wording. The out-of-pocket cost is payable 7 days before the procedure. If I now go to my quote actions, print quote, and I show you my private quote, there is no estimated rebate out-of-pocket cost on this one. Because I use ZZZ, it just puts in the total fee for each of the items. So sometimes when you do quotations, you may not be involved in calculating rebates and out-of-pocket costs. ZZZ is fantastic in your templates. So when you use it, it appears like this. So I fully encourage everybody on this call to set up multiple quote templates, especially if you're the type of practice when you're choosing your quote, you go to print quote, and for a certain situation, you're changing the same word every single time. That tells me that's a good situation to make multiple quote templates. The last part as part of today's presentation I'm going to be covering is what we call custom forms. Now, this is useful for when you need to be handwriting on a form. For instance, it might be a hospital procedure, admission, or consent form. Genie has got the ability to have a background image with text on the top. So first of all, there are some users that have uploaded these to our servers, or some of these that we have created ourselves. In our special menu of Genie, I go to Software Updates. And if I go to the Forms section over here, these are the forms that we have already built for our Genie users or other users have built for you. So if I click on Admission Forms, you can see there's quite a few hospital admission forms already here for you, and that does a lot of the hard work for you. We've got consent forms as well. But I'm going to show you in PBS. We have a significant number of PBS forms here. So for today's demonstration, I'm just going to be showing you this particular PBS form over here. If I choose Import and Save, that saves it into Genie for future use. So what this does is when I've got a patient and I click on the Merge Letters button over here, there's a new entry in the screen with a green page. This is our custom form. So what this does, this is the Medicare form that's been downloaded. And what you'll see is built into that form is a lot of the patient demographic information. This might be items that you are handwriting at the moment. So because we've already done a lot of the hard work for you, you can safely just print this out. And because I've got print background ticked, this will save you a significant amount of handwriting. So I fully encourage you to look in that special menu to have a look at the different forms that you have available. There might be instances that maybe the form that you're handwriting or filling out in a PDF on your computer isn't in our special menu, and you want to create that form yourself. You can build your own custom form by clicking Custom Form over here. From this window, this allows us to build our template. So if I click on this button over here, this lets me add my background image. I'm going to go Add to look on my computer for my background image. Here is a generic hospital admission form that we have. For copyright reasons, we can't use a proper hospital, but what this will do is this loads up the form and the background image into the background, and from here, you can start putting in your fields. So it's just the same as before. You go to the fields, you find what it is that you're looking for instance, the patient's name, and you just click and drag it in. You repeat that for other options as you need to fill out the form that you have. You also have other tools available, for instance, put in your own text, mark an X, or tick an item. So this will help you a lot with your filling out of forms. I'm going to give this one a title, for instance, hospital admission form. Now, it's not critical that a copy of the clinical file when we print this, that a copy is saved in the clinical file. But we do have another option here, create a consultation after print. So maybe I want to have a consult note created every time I print out this hospital admission form. There are situations when you print out one of these forms, you want to document, you've got a consult note. I'm making a permanent change to my template, so I click that Save button, and any future patient. Now I can print out a hospital admission form for that patient.